The file arrived at midnight with a name that shouldn't exist. Not a hunter, not a blood mage, not a supernatural threat. Just a girl. But when Vampire King Dragomir Bellamort read Caitlin Pryor, his immortal body did something it hadn't done in 700 years. It remembered. And what he discovered next would shatter everything he'd sworn never to feel again. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell, because this story is about to get intense. The quantum encrypted channel blazed to life in the darkness beneath Bucharest. A Black Seal Authority sigil materialized, reserved for extinction-level threats. Dragomir Bellamort looked up from the ancient manuscript in his private study. Around him, the techno-Gothic citadel hummed with power, ancient stone carved with elder runes, holographic interfaces floating like ghost code through chambers older than empires. The air grew cold. Sir Calvestros emerged from the shadows, his weathered face tight. "My lord, that's a Council Prime Directive. They haven't issued one since the Blood Plague of 1347. "I remember," Dragomir said quietly. The holographic file expanded. His eyes, the colour of dying stars, scanned the transmission. Priority, Black Seal. Classification, species level, destabilization. Action required, immediate termination assigned, Lord Dragomir Bellamort. Personal execution required. In 700 years, the Council had never assigned him personally. He was their weapon of last resort. They didn't waste him on individuals, unless something was catastrophically wrong. The target file materialized, a young woman, mid-20s, dark hair, warm brown eyes. Captured mid-laugh at a community health clinic. She looked kind. Subject, Pryor, Caitlin age, 24. Occupation, medical student threat. Classification, destabilization catalyst. A medical student? Dragomir's eyes narrowed. Threat, analysis. Subject unites human and supernatural populations. Destabilizes fear compliance systems. Spreads dangerous hope. Conventional termination protocols have failed. Council determination. Subject must disappear before next speech, less 72 hours. Special mandate. We don't trust anyone else with her, Dragomir. The manuscript slipped from his fingers. They're afraid of her, he said slowly. Genuinely afraid. But as he stared at her name hovering in holographic fire, something impossible happened. Pressure tightened around his chest. Not hunger, not rage. Something older, recognition. "My lord," Calvestros stepped forward, "your aura just fluctuated. I haven't seen that since the Purge. 15 years ago, when you nearly died." Dragomir's hand moved unconsciously to his back, where phantom scars still ached. Silver stakes, blessed chains, anti-immortal technology that should have ended him. He'd survived only because someone had helped him escape. A nameless girl with trembling hands who'd pulled the stakes from his back without asking his name, without demanding payment, without fear. He'd assumed she'd died in the chaos. But now, staring at Caitlin Pryor's photograph, impossible. The air pressure dropped again. Countess Nereza materialized, her violet eyes, older than Dragomir by 3 centuries, fixed on the holographic file with intensity that made reality bend. "That bloodline," she whispered. "Dragomir, I sense something that shouldn't exist anymore. Explain." Nereza's expression shifted to something approaching fear. "If I'm correct, Guy, the Council isn't ordering her death because she's politically dangerous. They're ordering it because she's biologically impossible, because humans like her were supposed to be extinct." "Humans like her?" "Carriers of Solis Vitae," Nereza said quietly. "The bloodline your predecessors hunted to extinction 5 centuries ago. The bloodline that makes vampires feel again." The chamber fell silent. For centuries, vampire rulers maintained control through emotional suppression. But Solis Vitae carriers disrupted that void, awakened what had been buried, made vampires remember what it felt like to care, to hope, to love. So the bloodline was erased, or so they'd believed. If she carries Solis Vitae, Calvestros said, this isn't about stability. This is about preventing an emotional revolution. Dragomir stared at the impossible girl who spread hope, who united enemies, who carried blood that could make monsters feel, who might be the same person who'd saved his life without knowing she was rescuing the king of the very creatures she'd later help coexist with humans. Every instinct screamed this was a trap, but something else terrified him more. For the first time in 7 centuries he felt curious, not about what she was, about who she was. "Prepare my travel arrangements," he said quietly. "I'll handle this personally." "My lord, this has trap written all over. That's not a request." Nereza watched him with ancient eyes. "And when you find her, when you're standing before this girl whose blood could make you feel things you've spent 700 years suppressing." Dragomir closed the file. "Then I'll decide if the council's fear is justified." His hand touched his back unconsciously where phantom scars ached, where a nameless girl had saved him, and deep in his chest something shifted, not hunger, not rage, something dangerously close to hope. "What happens when Dragomir finally meets Caitlin will change everything. Stay with me." 3 nights later, Dragomir stood in the shadows of an abandoned metro station beneath Prague's old town. The underground clinic shouldn't exist, not on any official map, not in any government database. Yet here it was, a makeshift medical sanctuary carved from Cold War-era tunnels, lit by battery-powered surgical lamps and filled with creatures who couldn't risk surface hospitals. Half-breeds with injuries that would raise questions. Refugee supernaturals fleeing persecution. Humans who knew, too, much to seek conventional help. And, at the centre of it all, her. Dragomir's cloaking magic bent light and perception around him like water around stone, rendering him invisible to mortal and immortal senses alike. It was ancient magic, perfected over 7 centuries, unbreakable by human awareness. From his position in the corner he watched Caitlin Pryor move between patients with quiet efficiency. She was smaller than her photographs suggested, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing simple scrubs marked with old bloodstains that wouldn't wash out. No makeup, no pretense, just focused competence and something infinitely rarer in his world, genuine compassion. "Hold still, Marcus," she murmured to a young werewolf whose forearm bore ugly silver burns. "This is going to sting, but it'll prevent infection." The boy, barely 18, nodded with complete trust. Dragomir's enhanced senses catalogued everything. Her heartbeat, steady, remarkably calm given her surroundings. Her scent, antiseptic soap layered over something floral. Her movements, practiced, efficient, carrying the muscle memory of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. She moved to her next patient, a vampire who'd been caught in partial sunlight. Burns covered half his gaunt face. Victor, this is the 3rd time this month," Caitlin said gently, applying silver-free ointment with careful precision. "You can't keep taking daytime construction jobs." The vampire looked away, shame evident even through his injuries. "My daughter's school fees." "I know." She squeezed his shoulder, a gesture that should have been dangerous with a starving vampire, but Victor only relaxed under her touch. "But she needs her father alive. There are night positions available at the docks. I can make a call." "You would do that?" "Of course." Something twisted in Dragomir's chest, an unfamiliar sensation he couldn't quite name. She treated them like people, not monsters, not threats, not the supernatural creatures centuries of vampire propaganda had taught humans to fear. Just people who needed help. A second figure emerged from the supply room, a young black woman with box braids and alert, observant eyes. She carried medical supplies but moved with the disciplined efficiency of military training. Eliza Binney. Dragomir recognized her from the intelligence files. Former army medic. Caitlin's best friend since medical school. Fiercely protective. Eliza's gaze swept the clinic in a security pattern that would have impressed trained soldiers. Her eyes passed over Dragomir's position, paused, returned. She couldn't see him, the cloaking magic was absolute, but her instincts were sharp. "Kate," Eliza said quietly, her hand drifting subtly toward her jacket. "We have a visitor." Dragomir remained perfectly still. Even his breathing had stopped, unnecessary for vampires, but habit from centuries of hunting. Caitlin looked up from bandaging Victor's face. Her warm brown eyes scanned the seemingly empty clinic, unfocused at first. Then they locked directly onto his position. The world stopped. She shouldn't be able to see him. No human could pierce elder vampire cloaking. It violated every law of supernatural physics he'd mastered over 7 centuries. But Caitlin Pryor looked straight at him, through ancient magic that had concealed him from armies, and spoke with quiet certainty. "You're not here to donate. If this is giving you chills, just wait. It gets so much more intense." The clinic fell silent. Every supernatural patient tensed, instinctively sensing the predator in their midst. Slowly Dragomir let the cloaking dissolve like morning mist. He stepped from the shadows, pale skin luminous under surgical lights, silver-white hair framing features that looked carved from marble, eyes like dying stars fixed on the impossible girl before him. Gasps rippled through the tunnel. Marcus stumbled backward, wolf instincts screaming danger. Victor went rigid with recognition and primal terror, but Caitlin didn't flinch. She studied him with clinical curiosity, head tilted slightly as if examining an interesting medical case. "You're what they're afraid of." Not a question, an observation. Eliza moved between them instantly, protective despite knowing exactly what stood before her. "Kate, get behind me." "It's okay, Eliza." Caitlin's voice remained impossibly calm. "If he wanted us dead, we'd already be dead." "How could you possibly know that?" "Because he's been standing there for 20 minutes, Caitlin replied, eyes never leaving Dragomir's face. "Watching, trying to understand something. If this were an attack, he wouldn't have waited." The accuracy of her assessment struck Dragomir like a physical blow. She took a step closer, and every instinct screamed at him to complete the mission. His hand could move faster than human perception. One strike. Mission accomplished. 700 years of loyalty to the Shadow Council maintained. But he stood frozen, because she was right. He didn't feel hunger looking at her. Didn't feel the predatory calculation that had defined 7 centuries of existence. He felt something far more dangerous, protective confusion, as if harming her would break something fundamental inside himself. Caitlin's expression softened, a small, sad smile that held impossible understanding. "You don't want to hurt me." Dragomir's jaw tightened. He should deny it, should reassert the cold authority that had kept him alive through wars and blood purges and political machinations that had destroyed lesser beings. Instead, he simply held her gaze. "No," he admitted quietly, "I don't." The confession felt like stepping off a cliff. Caitlin nodded as if he'd confirmed something she already knew. Then she turned back to her patients, dismissing the Immortal King as if he were just another observer. "You can stay if you want," she said over her shoulder. "But we're understaffed, so if you're here, make yourself useful." Before Dragomir could process the absolute audacity of a human girl ordering a vampire lord to help with medical triage, she was already moving to her next patient. He should leave, report back to the council, formulate a proper elimination strategy. Instead, he found himself staying, watching her save lives with the same focus he'd once used to end them. And when he finally dissolved back into shadows an hour later, mission unfulfilled, order disobeyed, Caitlin's quiet voice followed him into the darkness. "You don't want to hurt me. It's in your eyes." The truth of it burned worse than sunlight ever could. Dragomir returned to the citadel before dawn, his mind still replaying the impossible moment when Caitlin Pryor had looked directly through 7 centuries of mastered invisibility. Sir Calvestros was waiting in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays that cast his weathered features in harsh blue light. "My lord," the Guardian said without preamble, "we have a problem." "Only one?" Dragomir moved to the ancient stone table where digital files flickered beside centuries-old blood treaties. "She saw through elder cloaking magic, Calvestros. That alone violates every law of supernatural physics we understand." "It's worse than that," Calvestros expanded one of the holographic displays. "I've been searching classified Vanguard archives, the purge operations the Council tried to erase from history, and I found something in the Vienna records, 15 years ago." Dragomir went still. "The Vienna massacre." "Yes, my lord, the night the Luminous Order first attempted to expose our kind using anti-immortal technology." Calvestros's jaw tightened. "The night you nearly died." The memory slammed into Dragomir like a physical blow, silver stakes driven through his back, blessed chains wrapped around his throat, technology that shouldn't exist burning through flesh that had survived blade and fire for 700 years. He'd been careless that night, overconfident, had walked into what he thought was a simple diplomatic meeting and found himself in a kill box designed specifically for elder vampires. "I remember," Dragomir said quietly, his hand unconsciously moving to his back where phantom scars still ached on stormy nights. "The official report says you escaped on your own," Calvestros continued, his ancient eyes holding something that looked like dread. "But I accessed the sealed testimony, the evidence the Council suppressed. My lord, you didn't escape alone." The holographic display shifted, showing grainy surveillance footage from a burning building. Dragomir watched his own body, stakes protruding from his back, silver chains smoking against his skin, being dragged through rubble by a small figure. A teenage girl, no more than 16, her clothes torn and face streaked with ash. "Freeze image," Calvestros commanded. The hologram froze. "Facial recognition took 3 days to process through aging algorithms and identity databases." The girl's face clarified, features becoming sharp and defined despite the smoke and darkness. Dragomir's chest constricted, warm brown eyes, dark hair matted with blood and debris, small hands trembling as they gripped his arm. Caitlin Pryor. "No," he breathed. "That's impossible. She would have been 15 years old," Calvestros finished. "A high school student volunteering at a refugee center in the building next door. She shouldn't have even been there that night. Drop a comment if you saw this twist coming, because what Dragomir remembers next changes everything." The hologram played forward in terrible slow motion. Dragomir watched the teenage Caitlin drag his considerably larger body through flames and falling debris with desperate strength that should have been impossible for someone her size. She stumbled, fell, kept pulling him forward even as the building collapsed around them, found a service tunnel, pulled him into darkness. The camera angle switched. Emergency exit footage now. In the flickering emergency lights, young Caitlin knelt beside his broken body, her hands shaking violently as she gripped the first silver stake. "I don't know what you are," her voice came through the damaged audio, young and terrified, but determined. "But nobody deserves to die like this." She pulled. Dragomir remembered the pain, worse than the initial impalement because silver poisoning had set in, because his healing was suppressed, because every nerve ending screamed as blessed metal scraped against bone. He remembered trying to speak, to warn her that touching the stakes would burn her hands. He remembered her crying as she pulled the second stake free, her palms blistering from blessed silver, but not stopping. 3 stakes, 4, 5, each one an agony that would have killed a younger vampire, each one removed by trembling hands that burned themselves to save a monster. "Run," teenage Caitlin had whispered when the last stake clattered to the concrete. Her hands were ruined, skin blackened, flesh weeping. "Please, they're coming back. Just run." The footage showed Dragomir's younger self, barely conscious, being pushed toward the sewer entrance by this impossible girl who destroyed her own hands to free him. "Go," she'd sobbed. "I'll tell them you were already gone. Just go." He'd stumbled into the darkness, too injured to speak, to thank her, to even ask her name. Behind him, young Caitlin collapsed against the wall, cradling her ruined hands, and waited for the hunters to find her. The hologram ended. Dragomir stood in absolute silence. 700 years of carefully constructed emotional walls cracking like thin ice. The medical records show she spent 3 months in rehabilitation, Calvestros said quietly. Told authorities she'd injured her hands pulling debris off trapped survivors. No one questioned a teenage volunteer's story. No one knew she'd saved the vampire king himself. "She never told anyone," Dragomir whispered. 15 years. She never spoke of it. The question is, did she forget? Or does she remember and simply chose silence? Dragomir thought of Caitlin's eyes in the clinic, the way she'd looked at him with such calm certainty. "You don't want to hurt me. It's in your eyes." Had she recognized him? Or was it something deeper, some fundamental knowledge that he would never harm someone who'd shown him mercy when she could have simply walked away? "My lord," Calvestros's voice carried carefully, "the girl who saved your life 15 years ago is the same woman the council has ordered you to eliminate. This cannot be coincidence." "No," Dragomir agreed, his voice hollow. "It's a trap. They knew. Somehow they discovered what happened in Vienna, and they're using it." "Using it how?" Dragomir met his guardian's ancient gaze. "They're testing whether I'm still capable of absolute loyalty, whether I'll kill someone to whom I owe a blood debt, whether 700 years of service outweighs one act of human compassion." The truth settled over them like snow. "And if you refuse, then they'll know I've been compromised." Dragomir looked at the frozen image of teenage Caitlin, her hands ruined and bleeding, her eyes filled with tears, but also fierce determination to save a life she didn't understand. "That I've remembered what it feels like to be saved instead of feared." Calvestros was silent for a long moment. Then, "What will you do?" Dragomir stared at the girl who'd pulled silver stakes from his back with hands that would bear scars forever. The girl who'd grown into a woman who still saved lives, supernatural and human alike, with those same scarred hands. The woman who'd unknowingly saved the very monster now ordered to destroy her. "I don't know," he admitted, and the confession tasted like ash. "But I know one thing with certainty." "What's that, my lord?" I owe her a debt that 7 centuries of service to the Shadow Council cannot outweigh. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war, against his own kind, against everything he'd been for 700 years, for the girl who'd taught him that mercy still existed in a world built on fear. For the first time in 3 centuries, Dragomir dreamed. Not the blank void of vampire rest, not the dark nothingness that sustained immortal consciousness between waking periods. Dreams, sunlight warming skin that hadn't felt natural heat in 700 years. A heartbeat, not his own, but one he somehow recognised. And Caitlin Pryor standing in firelight, her scarred hands extended toward him, offering something he couldn't name but desperately wanted. He woke gasping in his private chambers, the sensation so foreign it took him several seconds to identify it. Hope. Impossible, he whispered to the darkness. A presence materialized in the corner, Countess Nereza, her violet eyes luminous in the pre-dawn gloom. Not impossible, she said quietly. Inevitable. The moment you encountered her, this became inevitable. Dragomir rose, his control reasserting itself despite the lingering warmth from the dream. How long have you been there? Long enough to feel the shift in your aura. Nereza moved closer, her ancient power reading him like text. You're dreaming again, feeling things you buried centuries ago, and it's accelerating faster than I anticipated. The Solis Vitae, Dragomir said. You mentioned it when her file arrived. Tell me everything. Nereza was silent for a long moment, as if gathering fragments of history almost too old to remember. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of millennia. Before the vampire courts consolidated power, before we built our empires on fear and blood treaties, humans and immortals coexisted differently. Some human bloodlines carried genetic markers that affected us, not weakening us physically, but emotionally. She gestured, and holographic symbols appeared in the air, ancient glyphs that predated written language. Solis Vitae, life touched by sun. Humans who carried this bloodline had a presence that disrupted our emotional suppression, made us feel again, made us remember what we'd sacrificed for immortality. Vulnerability, Dragomir said. Humanity, Nereza corrected, which to our ancestors was the same thing. A vampire who could feel love could be controlled through that love. One who could feel fear could be manipulated. One who could feel guilt could question orders, Dragomir finished, understanding crystallizing. Could refuse to kill innocents, could challenge the system built on terror. Exactly. So 500 years ago, the Shadow Council's predecessors made a decision. Nereza's expression hardened. They hunted every Solis Vitae carrier to extinction, called it the Purification, erased them from history so thoroughly that even most vampires today believe it was myth. This is why the Council wants her dead. Keep watching. This gets darker. But Caitlin survived, Dragomir said. Her bloodline survived. Hidden. Diluted over generations until the markers were nearly undetectable, but present. Nereza's eyes met his, and now concentrated enough in her that even brief proximity is affecting you. The dreams, Dragomir. When was the last time you dreamed? 1702, he admitted, before I mastered complete emotional suppression. And now you dream of sunlight, of heartbeats, of her. Nereza's voice softened. This is what terrifies the Council. Not that she unites humans and supernaturals politically, that she does it emotionally, that her very presence reminds us what we've lost, what we could have again. Dragomir thought of Caitlin's scarred hands saving lives in that underground clinic, of her calm certainty when she'd looked at him. You don't want to hurt me. She'd been right, because being near her made him remember what wanting to protect felt like instead of dominate. "If the council knows what she carries," he said slowly, "then they won't stop with a single kill order. No, they'll want to study her first, confirm the bloodline, then ensure no trace remains." Nereza's jaw tightened. "They've already dispatched research teams, Dragomir. This was never just an assassination. It's a genetic erasure." The holographic display shifted, showing surveillance feeds, black vans positioned near Caitlin's apartment building, heat signatures indicating armed teams, magical suppression fields being calibrated. "When?" Dragomir's voice was ice. "Tonight. They're waiting for—" Dragomir's phone vibrated. Unknown number. He answered on instinct. "This is Eliza Binney." The voice was tight with controlled panic. "I don't know how you found us or what you want with Kate, but I'm former military intelligence and I know what tactical positioning looks like. There are teams surrounding her building, professional, non-human, and they're not here for me." Dragomir's enhanced hearing picked up background noise, Caitlin's voice asking who Eliza was calling, confusion evident. "How did you get this number?" he demanded. "I'm good at my job, and right now my job is keeping my best friend alive." Eliza's voice dropped. "I saw how you looked at her in the clinic, like she was something precious, so I'm gambling that whatever you are, you're not with them. Was I wrong?" Dragomir looked at Nereza, who nodded grimly. The teams were moving. "Get her out of there," he said. "Now." "Where? We have maybe 10 minutes before—" "The rooftop. I'm coming." He ended the call and moved toward the armory, pulling on tactical gear he hadn't worn in decades. Reinforced coat, silver-warded gloves, weapons designed to kill his own kind. "My lord," Nereza said carefully, "if you do this, if you protect her against council operatives, there's no coming back. They'll declare you rogue, hunt you alongside her. I know. 700 years of loyalty, your entire court, everything you've built." Dragomir stopped at the threshold, his reflection catching in polished obsidian, pale, timeless, powerful, a vampire king who'd never been anything but what the council created, until a girl with scarred hands had pulled stakes from his back and told him to run, until that same girl had grown into a woman who made him dream of sunlight. "She saved my life when she was 15 years old," he said quietly. "Ruined her hands pulling blessed silver from my flesh. Never asked for payment, never told anyone, just did it because she believed no one deserved to die in pain." He met Nereza's ancient gaze. "I've spent 700 years being a weapon for people who hunt children like her to extinction, who erase bloodlines because feeling emotions threatens their control." His voice hardened with something that felt like purpose. "Maybe it's time I remembered what I was before they made me into this." And what was that? Someone who believed in protecting the innocent. Before I forgot what innocence looked like, he dissolved into shadow form, preparing to traverse the distance to Prague in seconds rather than hours. Nereza's voice followed him. "She's changing you, Dragomir, and there's no reversing it." "Good," he said, and meant it. Then he was gone, racing through darkness toward the girl whose blood made monsters feel, whose presence reminded him that 700 years of existence without purpose wasn't living. It was just surviving, and he was done, merely surviving. Caitlin's apartment was modest, a third-floor walk-up filled with medical textbooks and plants somehow thriving despite limited sunlight. She stood by the window, confusion evident as Eliza moved frantically through the space, grabbing emergency supplies. "Eliza, what's—" The temperature dropped 15 degrees in an instant. Shadows coalesced in the corner, and Dragomir stepped from darkness directly into her living room, his presence filling the small space like gathering storm pressure. Caitlin didn't scream, didn't run. She just looked at him with those impossibly calm eyes and said, "You came," as if she'd known he would. "You're in danger," Dragomir said, his voice rougher than intended, "because of something in your blood, something ancient and precious that powerful people want erased." "And because of you?" Caitlin asked quietly. He met her gaze. "Yes, because of me." Outside, footsteps echoed in the stairwell, multiple teams, moving with coordinated precision. Time was up. "We need to leave, now." Dragomir moved to the window, his enhanced senses cataloguing the tactical positions below. "They've surrounded the building." Eliza already had a go-bag over her shoulder, her military training evident in her efficient movements. "How many?" 12 ground units, 4 aerial drones, 2 blood mages maintaining suppression fields. Dragomir's jaw tightened. "They're not here to capture. This is an elimination team." Caitlin still hadn't moved from her position by the bookshelf, her scarred hands resting calmly at her sides despite the danger. "Why are they trying to kill me? I run a clinic. I help people. I haven't done anything wrong." "You exist," Dragomir said, turning to face her. "That's your crime. Your bloodline, Solis Vitae. It threatens everything the Shadow Council has built their power upon." "My bloodline? I'm just human." "You're human with genetic markers that were supposed to be extinct for 500 years. He took a step closer, urgency overriding caution. "Your presence makes vampires feel again, makes us remember what we sacrificed for immortality. The Council can't control vampires who can feel love, hope, compassion, so they erased every carrier of your bloodline. Except they missed one," Eliza said grimly. "Her family." "Until now?" Dragomir's expression hardened. "We have perhaps 3 minutes before they breach this apartment." Caitlin met his eyes with that impossible calm that had pierced through his cloaking magic. "And you? You're one of them, the Shadow Council. Why are you helping me instead of killing me?" The question hung between them like a blade. Dragomir could hear footsteps on the stairs now, multiple teams converging, could smell the ozone scent of charged magical weapons, could feel reality bending as suppression fields tightened around the building. "Because 15 years ago," he said quietly, "a teenage girl pulled silver stakes from my back when she could have left me to burn. She ruined her hands with blessed metal to save a monster she didn't know, never asked for payment, never told anyone. Just did it because she believed no one deserved to die in agony." Understanding dawned in Caitlin's eyes. "Vienna, the refugee centre fire." "That was you?" "You remember?" "I remember pulling stakes from someone's back. I remember his eyes." She stopped, studying his face with new recognition. "Your eyes? I told myself I'd imagined how silver they looked in the firelight. But I didn't imagine it, did I?" "No." The door exploded inward. Dragomir moved before conscious thought, placing himself between Caitlin and the breach, power radiating from him like winter frost. 3 enforcers in tactical armour rushed through, weapons raised. They froze when they saw who stood before them. "Lord Bellamort," the lead enforcer stammered. "We were told. The Council said you were handling this personally. We're here as backup." "I don't need backup," Dragomir said softly. "And you're going to leave. Now." "My lord, our orders are superseded by mine." Dragomir's voice carried absolute authority. "The girl is under my personal protection. Tell the Council I'm invoking ancient law, blood debt, paid in sanctuary." The enforcer's eyes widened. "My lord, blood debt sanctuary was abolished in 1523. It's no longer recognised. I'm recognising it." Dragomir's power filled the room, making the walls frost over. and I suggest you decide very quickly whether you want to challenge an elder vampire on matters of ancient law." The three enforcers exchanged glances, then slowly backed toward the door. "The council will never accept this," the leader said. "They'll declare you rogue, strip your titles, hunt you." "Then they'll hunt me." Dragomir didn't move. "But they won't touch her, not while I'm standing." The enforcers fled, and what happens next will change everything Dragomir has built over 7 centuries. Eliza exhaled shakily. "That just bought us maybe an hour before they send something worse." "I know." Dragomir turned to Caitlin. "I have a safe house in the Black Forest, protected by wards older than most European nations. We can reach it before—" "What did you just do?" Caitlin interrupted, her voice quiet but carrying an edge he hadn't heard before. "You just made yourself a target, for me. Why?" Dragomir met her eyes, those warm brown eyes that had looked at a bleeding monster with compassion instead of fear. "Because killing you would be easy," he said. "I've killed for 700 years. I'm very good at it. But living with myself after killing someone who showed me mercy when I deserved none?" He paused. "That would be impossible." Caitlin studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "The Black Forest safe house. How do we get there?" "Shadow transit. It's disorienting for humans, but fast." "I'll manage." Eliza grabbed Caitlin's arm. "Kate, we don't know if we can trust him. This could be—" "He just declared war on his own government to protect me," Caitlin said softly. "Either he's genuine or this is the most elaborate trap in history. I'm choosing to believe the former." "Why?" Eliza demanded. Caitlin looked at Dragomir, and something passed between them. Recognition deeper than memory. "Because 15 years ago I looked into his eyes and saw someone in pain who needed help. I see the same thing now, just different pain." The building shuddered. Outside, magical artillery charged. Council heavy weapons designed to level entire structures. "They're done negotiating," Dragomir said. "Eliza, take Caitlin's hand. Don't let go no matter what you see in the shadows." "Wait," Caitlin said. "What about the other people in this building? The families on the floors below?" Dragomir paused, something twisting in his chest. 700 years ago he wouldn't have considered collateral damage, would have only calculated his own survival. But, looking at Caitlin's scarred hands, remembering her pulling stakes despite the pain, he realized she'd changed more than just his ability to dream. She'd reminded him what protecting the innocent actually meant. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. "Neredza will trigger the fire alarms. Everyone will evacuate. The council won't risk human witnesses." "Thank you," Caitlin said simply. Those 2 words, genuine gratitude from someone who should fear him, hit harder than any weapon. And if you think this choice costs Dragomir everything, you're absolutely right. "Ready?" he asked. Caitlin took Eliza's hand, then extended her scarred palm toward Dragomir. "Ready?" Her skin was warm against his perpetually cold touch. The contact sent something electric through him, not Solis Vitae magic, but something simpler and infinitely more dangerous. Trust. Darkness enfolded them like wings, and they dissolved into shadow just as the building exploded into flames behind them. Somewhere in the citadel beneath Bucharest, alarms blazed to life as Dragomir's biometric signature vanished from council tracking systems. And the Shadow Council realized their greatest weapon had just chosen the other side. The Black Forest safe house materialized around them as Shadow Transit released its hold. Caitlin stumbled, disoriented by the journey through darkness. Dragomir caught her arm instinctively, steadying her against him. For a moment they stood close enough that he could feel her heartbeat, steady despite everything, remarkably calm. "You okay?" Eliza asked, her hand moving protectively to Caitlin's shoulder. I'm fine, that was intense. Caitlin looked around the safe house. Ancient stone walls covered in glowing runes, modern technology seamlessly integrated with centuries-old protection wards. Where are we? 70 kilometers southwest of Stuttgart, Dragomir said, releasing her arm, though part of him didn't want to. This location predates the vampire courts. Even the council doesn't know it exists. Then we're safe here? Eliza's skepticism was evident. For now. A holographic interface flickered to life, and Countess Nereza's image appeared, her violet eyes urgent. Dragomir, we have a problem. I've been monitoring council communications since you went dark. What did you find? Nereza's expression was grim. Everything, the entire operation. Dragomir, they never intended Caitlin to die quickly. Caitlin stepped forward. What do you mean? The kill order was theatre, Nereza explained, her ancient voice carrying bitter certainty. The council's actual plan: capture you alive, study your bloodline for genetic markers, then execute you publicly in a broadcast to every supernatural network worldwide. Why publicly? Eliza demanded. To send a message, Dragomir said, the pieces falling into horrible place, that even Solis Vitae carriers, even humans who make us feel, can be eliminated, that the council's power is absolute. Worse than that, Nereza expanded the holographic display, showing encrypted files. They plan to use your presence at the execution, Dragomir. Proof that even the most powerful vampire chooses duty over emotion. That 700 years of loyalty outweighs any human compassion. The implication hit like a physical blow. They wanted me to bring her in, Dragomir said slowly. Wanted me to be the one who delivered her to them. To prove that the Solis Vitae effect could be resisted by sheer will. And when the supernatural world saw their king execute the girl whose bloodline makes vampires feel again, Nereza continued, it would have crushed any hope of emotional revolution, reinforced the fear-based hierarchy for another century. Caitlin's voice was quiet but steady. So my death was never about me. It was about making an example, about controlling your entire species through fear. Yes, but that's not even the worst part, Nereza said. She pulled up another file, tactical maps, troop movements, human militant positions. The council has been funding the Luminous Order, the human radicals who want to expose vampires, who want war between species. Eliza's eyes widened. They're funding both sides? Classic strategy, Dragomir said bitterly. Create the threat, then. Position yourself as the only solution. The Luminous Order exposes vampires, humans panic, violence erupts, and the council steps in with overwhelming force, Nereza finished, justifying centuries of brutal control as necessary protection. They get their war, their proof that humans and vampires can't coexist, and absolute authority to crush any future peace movements. Using Caitlin's execution as the spark, Eliza said, her death broadcasts everywhere. The Luminous Order retaliates, and suddenly you have species war. Caitlin moved to the window, looking out at the dark forest. When she spoke, her voice carried something harder than Dragomir had heard before. How many people die in this scripted war? Millions, Nereza said quietly, human and supernatural. The projections estimate 5 years of conflict before either side achieves dominance. And the council profits from all of it, Dragomir added. Weapons contracts, territory seizures, elimination of political rivals in the chaos. They've been planning this for decades. Caitlin turned back to face them, and Dragomir saw something in her eyes that reminded him of the teenage girl who'd pulled stakes from his back, despite the pain, fierce determination beneath gentle exterior. Then we stop them, she said simply. How? Eliza asked. We're 3 people and a hologram against the entire Shadow Council. We expose them, Caitlin said. You have those files, right? The proof of their manipulation, their funding of the Luminous Order, their plan to start a war? Yes, but... Then we show everyone. Every supernatural network, every human news outlet, every platform they can't control. We take away their ability to control the narrative. Dragomir stared at her. That would be declaring open war against the Council. They'd hunt us relentlessly. You'd never be safe again. I'm already not safe, Caitlin pointed out. At least this way, we're fighting back instead of just hiding. She's right, Nereza said from the hologram. The Council's power depends on secrecy and manufactured fear. Expose their manipulation and the entire system fractures. There's a peace summit scheduled in 3 days, Eliza said suddenly, pulling out her phone. Underground event, Prague. Both human activists and supernatural reformers. Caitlin was supposed to speak before... She trailed off. Before the Council eliminated me, Caitlin finished. That's perfect. That's where we do it. That's where we show everyone the truth. They'll know it's a trap, Dragomir warned. They'll come prepared to eliminate everyone there. Good, Caitlin said, and her voice carried steel. Let them come. Let them show the world exactly who they are when the cameras are rolling and they can't hide behind shadows anymore. Dragomir felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Not just protective instinct, but something deeper. Admiration. This human girl facing down an immortal conspiracy with nothing but courage and scarred hands. You realize they'll send everything they have, he said. Enforcers, blood mages, weapons designed to kill hundreds. It won't just be dangerous. It will be a massacre. Caitlin met his eyes. Then I guess we'd better make sure we're ready. You said you owed me a blood debt. I'm calling it in now. Help me stop this war before it starts. The choice crystallized before him with terrible clarity. 700 years of loyalty to the Shadow Council, or one human girl who'd reminded him what honor actually meant. The summit is in 3 days, he said. That gives us 72 hours to prepare. Nereza, I need you to leak the Council files to every independent supernatural network. Make sure they can't be traced back to you. Already working on it, Nereza said. Eliza, I need you to contact every human activist you trust. Tell them to bring cameras, live stream equipment, anything that broadcasts in real time. On it, Dragomir turned to Caitlin, and you need to understand something after this. There's no going back. The Council will never stop hunting us. We'll be fugitives for the rest of our lives. Caitlin smiled. Small, sad, but absolutely certain. I stopped having a normal life the moment I pulled those stakes from your back 15 years ago. I just didn't know it yet. Outside, in the depths of the citadel beneath Bucharest, the Shadow Council convened in emergency session, and they began preparing for war. The peace summit was held in the catacombs beneath Prague's old town, ancient tunnels that had sheltered both humans and supernaturals during centuries of conflict. Tonight they sheltered hope. Dragomir watched from the shadows as nearly 300 beings filled the space, humans and vampires, werewolves and mages, half-breeds and activists. All gathered because they believed coexistence was possible, because Caitlin Pryor had convinced them that fear didn't have to define their future. She stood on the makeshift stage now, her scarred hands resting on the podium, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. For too long, we've been told that our differences make us enemies, Caitlin said, that humans must fear supernaturals, and supernaturals must dominate humans. But I've spent the last 3 years running clinics where we help each other. where species doesn't matter, where the only question is, who needs healing? Applause rippled through the crowd. Dragomir could see Eliza positioned near the exits, her military training evident in how she monitored the perimeter. Live stream cameras captured everything, dozens of independent feeds broadcasting to millions, exactly as planned. What you don't know, Caitlin continued, her voice gaining strength, is that this summit, this moment of hope, was supposed to end in massacre. The crowd murmured, confused. 3 days ago, I learned that the Shadow Council has been manipulating both sides, funding radicals, staging supernatural attacks, creating the very violence they claim to prevent. She nodded to someone off-screen. Show them. Holographic displays erupted throughout the space. Nereza's leaked files projected for everyone to see. Financial records showing council payments to the Luminous Order. Communications planning false flag attacks. Tactical documents outlining how to provoke species war. And the original kill order for Caitlin Pryor, labelled Execution to be broadcast as catalyst for human-vampire conflict. The crowd erupted, shock, anger, betrayal, rippling through supernatural and human attendees alike. They wanted us to fight, Caitlin said over the chaos, wanted us to destroy each other while they consolidated power through fear. But we're here tonight to show them that we choose differently. We choose. The lights died. Emergency power failed. And in the absolute darkness, Dragomir's enhanced senses detected what he'd been dreading. They're here, he said quietly. The catacombs exploded with violence. Council enforcers dropped from concealed ceiling breaches, 30 of them in full tactical armour. Blood drones activated, their crimson sensors sweeping for targets. Psychic suppressors hummed to life, designed to paralyse supernatural minds. Screams filled the darkness as attendees scrambled for exits that were already sealing. "Eliza!" Dragomir shouted. "Get Caitlin out!" But Caitlin wasn't running. She stood on the stage, her phone raised, live stream still broadcasting even in the darkness. "The world is watching," she shouted. "Show them who you really are." An enforcer lunged toward her. Dragomir moved faster than human perception, crossing 50 meters in the space between heartbeats. He intercepted the enforcer mid-strike, redirecting the blow into stone. The enforcer's armor cracked against ancient rock. "Get back," Dragomir commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. More enforcers converged, recognizing their primary target had just revealed himself. "Lord Bellamort," the lead enforcer's voice crackled through helmet speakers. "Stand down. The council has ordered your immediate termination for treason." "Then tell the council," Dragomir said, his power radiating outward like winter frost, "that I'm done taking orders from cowards who manufacture wars to maintain relevance." He released the full weight of his presence, 700 years of accumulated power that made the air itself freeze. Lesser vampires in the enforcer squad stumbled, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of an elder vampire no longer restraining himself. The blood drones pivoted toward him, charging plasma weapons that could burn through supernatural flesh. Dragomir raised his hand. Ancient magic, older than the council, older than the courts, older than the political structures that had corrupted what vampires once were, surged through him. The technology shorting out, circuits frying, modern weapons, reduced to useless metal against power that predated their invention. 12 drones fell from the air like dead birds. "Impossible," someone whispered. But Dragomir was just beginning, and this public declaration would either save 2 species or doom them both. He stepped into the centre of the space, into the light from Caitlin's live stream, into view of millions watching worldwide, and let them see what he truly was. Not the Council's weapon, not their symbol of fear-based control, just an immortal who'd finally remembered what he'd sacrificed 7 centuries ago when he'd chosen power over principle. "I am Dragomir Bellamort," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the catacombs and through every broadcast feed. "First of the Shadow Court, and I stand with those who choose peace over perpetual war," the enforcers charged. Dragomir didn't kill them. That would prove the Council's narrative that violence was inevitable. Instead, he demonstrated something far more terrifying to those who ruled through fear. Restraint. He disarmed them without permanent injury, disabled their weapons without destroying the soldiers, showed 700 years of martial mastery channeled not into domination, but into protection. Each move was precise, controlled, powerful enough to overwhelm, gentle enough to preserve life. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their greatest myth, the immortal vampire king who'd never shown mercy, chose mercy over massacre. "Stand down," Dragomir commanded the remaining enforcers. "You've lost. The world has seen the truth. The Council's manipulation is exposed. You can continue this violence and prove everything Caitlin said about manufactured conflict, or you can choose differently." One by one, the enforcers lowered their weapons, not because they were defeated. They still had numbers, still had reinforcements coming, but because continuing the fight while millions watched would validate every accusation against the Council. The lead enforcer removed his helmet. Beneath was a young vampire, barely a century old, his eyes wide with something between awe and confusion. "You're really choosing them?" he asked. "Choosing humans over your own kind?" "I'm choosing truth over lies," Dragomir replied. "Choosing protection over domination. And yes, choosing the human who reminded me what those principles meant over the Council that made me forget them." He looked at Caitlin, still standing on the stage, her live stream capturing everything. She smiled at him, that same gentle smile that had somehow pierced 7 centuries of emotional armour. The enforcer looked between them, then at his squad, then at the crowd of humans and supernaturals who'd been moments from death but now watched with cautious hope. "The Council won't accept this," he said finally. "They'll send more. Worse." "I know," Dragomir said, "but they'll do it while the entire world watches, and every act of violence they commit now will only prove that we were right to resist them." Emergency broadcasts blazed across supernatural networks, the Shadow Council's official channels trying to control the narrative, to explain away the leaked files, to maintain their crumbling authority. But it was too late. Millions had watched a vampire king choose protection over power, had seen proof of systematic manipulation, had witnessed the Council's enforcers attacking a peace summit while claiming to prevent violence. The carefully constructed system of fear-based control was fracturing in real time. And in the citadel beneath Bucharest, the Shadow Council realized their greatest weapon had just become their greatest threat. The aftermath of the summit erupted across every network, supernatural and human alike. Dragomir stood in the Black Forest safe house, watching holographic displays scroll through global reactions. The leaked council files had gone viral beyond containment. News outlets dissected financial records. Activists identified victims of manufactured attacks. The carefully constructed lies of centuries unravelled in hours. 17 council members have already gone into hiding, Nereza reported, her holographic presence flickering with barely contained satisfaction. The European court is fracturing. Asia and North America are demanding independent investigations. Dragomir, you've done what I thought was impossible. You've made them accountable. At what cost? Eliza asked. from her position by the window, rifle across her lap. "They've declared him an enemy of the state. Every vampire loyal to the council is hunting us." "Not every vampire," Nereza corrected. "Many are questioning their loyalty, some openly. The younger generations especially. They're asking why they should maintain systems built on lies." Dragomir barely heard them. His attention was on Caitlin, who sat at the ancient stone table, her scarred hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. She'd been quiet since they'd escaped Prague, processing everything that had happened. "How many?" she asked suddenly. "How many what?" Dragomir moved closer. "How many council members are left? How many still support the old system?" 7 of the original 13, Nereza said. "The hardliners. They've consolidated power in the citadel beneath Bucharest and declared martial law over all council territories." "And they're preparing something," Eliza added grimly. "My contacts report massive troop movements, ancient weapons being unsealed. They're not accepting defeat quietly." Caitlin finally looked up, meeting Dragomir's eyes. "They're going to come for us, aren't they? Not just enforcers this time, everything they have." "Yes." "When?" "Soon." Dragomir sat across from her, struck again by how calm she remained while discussing her own potential execution. "They can't allow what happened at the summit to stand. Can't let a human and a rogue vampire dismantle centuries of authority without response. So what do we do?" Before Dragomir could answer, Nereza's expression shifted to alarm. "We have incoming. Fast-moving signatures, multiple vectors. They're not bothering with stealth." "How many?" Eliza was already moving to defensive positions. 12 elite enforcers, 3 blood mages, and... Nereza paused, her ancient eyes widening. "Lord Valdric, they sent a council member personally." Dragomir went very still. Valdric was old, nearly as old as he was, powerful enough to level cities, ruthless enough to have orchestrated some of the bloodiest purges in vampire history. "They're not coming to arrest us," he said quietly. "They're coming to erase us, completely." "Can you fight him?" Caitlin asked. "Maybe, but not while protecting you and Eliza, not against those numbers." He stood, making a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. "Nereza, I need you to do something." "Anything, my lord." "Stop calling me that. I'm not their lord anymore." He moved to the weapons cache, pulling out artifacts he'd hoped never to use. "I need you to broadcast what happens here. Everything, every supernatural network, every human news feed you can access. Make sure the world sees what the council does when they're truly desperate." Understanding dawned in Nereza's violet eyes. "You're going to make them choose between killing you publicly or backing down." "They won't back down," Dragomir said. "Their authority depends on demonstrating absolute power. But when millions watch them murder someone for choosing peace over control, it will be the final proof that the system is irredeemable." "That's suicide," Eliza protested. "No," Caitlin said quietly, standing. "It's testimony. He's making his death mean something." She crossed to him, and Dragomir felt his carefully maintained composure cracking under her steady gaze. "You were supposed to end me, weren't you?" she asked softly. "That was the original order. Kill Caitlin Pryor before she destabilizes the system." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" The question he'd been avoiding since the moment he'd first seen her name on that kill order, since he'd watched her in the clinic treating monsters with compassion, since he'd remembered her teenage hands pulling stakes from his back. "Because killing you would have been the easy part," he said, the words coming from somewhere deeper than 7 centuries of practiced control. "I've killed for 700 years, ended threats, eliminated problems, served the council's vision of order through fear. I was very good at it. He paused, and something in his chest, something that had been frozen for so long, finally broke free. But living with myself after killing someone who showed me mercy when I deserved none? His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Someone who reminded me what I'd sacrificed when I chose immortality over humanity? Living with that would have been impossible. Caitlin's eyes glistened. You're doing it again, choosing the hard thing instead of the easy one. I learned from the best, he said, looking at her scarred hands. A 15-year-old girl who ruined her hands, saving a monster because she believed no one deserved to die in agony. That took more courage than 700 years of my existence combined. Outside, the forest trembled. The council forces were approaching, their power making reality itself bend. They're here, Nereza announced, broadcasting to 47 million viewers and climbing. The world is watching, Dragomir. He turned to Caitlin one last time. Whatever happens, you need to survive this. The movement you've started, it's bigger than me, bigger than the council. It's the future trying to be born. Then help me build it, Caitlin said, and there was steel beneath the gentleness. Don't martyr yourself when you could actually change things. We didn't expose the council's corruption just to let them kill you and claim victory. She's right, Eliza said, chambering around. We fight, together. The safe house shuddered as the first impact struck the outer wards. Lord Valdric's voice echoed through the stone, amplified by ancient magic. Dragomir Bellamort, you are charged with treason against the Shadow Council. Surrender the human and submit to judgment, or face complete erasure. Dragomir looked at Caitlin, at Eliza, at Nereza's holographic form. 700 years ago he would have calculated odds, assessed tactical advantages, made the coldly rational choice. But 700 years ago he hadn't known what it felt like to choose something worth dying for, or better yet, worth living for. Broadcast this, he said to Nereza. Then he walked to the door, opened it to face the council's judgment, and spoke words that would echo across every network worldwide. I am Dragomir Bellamort. I do not surrender, I do not submit, and I will not allow this system of fear to continue unopposed. If you want to silence truth, you'll have to do it while the entire world watches. Behind him, Caitlin and Eliza stood ready, and 47 million people held their breath. Lord Valdric stood at the edge of the clearing, his presence making the air itself freeze. Behind him, 12 elite enforcers and 3 blood mages formed a semicircle of lethal intent. 47 million viewers, Valdric said, his voice carrying 7 centuries of cold authority. You always did have a flair for theatre, Dragomir, but this changes nothing. You've betrayed everything we built, everything we are. No, Dragomir replied, feeling Caitlin's presence steady behind him. I've remembered what we were before fear became our only currency, before we confused control with leadership. Philosophical rebellion, Valdric smiled without warmth. How noble, it won't save you. He raised his hand and reality twisted. The ancient binding weapon materialized, a construct of pure magical energy, designed to strip immortality itself, to not just kill a vampire, but erase them from existence, unmake 7 centuries of accumulated power, the weapon that could end gods. Last chance, Valdric said. Surrender the girl. Submit to council authority. We might allow you to exist in diminished form. Dragomir felt the weapon's pull, like hooks in his soul, trying to tear apart the fundamental magic that sustained his immortality. Felt his power beginning to unravel under its influence. This was how they'd maintained absolute control, not through strength, but through the threat of complete erasure, fear of losing everything. "No," he said simply. Valdric's expression hardened. "Then you'll cease to exist. The council will continue, and this girl whose bloodline makes you feel will die knowing she accomplished nothing." The binding weapon surged forward. Dragomir should have dodged, should have defended, should have fought with 700 years of accumulated power and technique. Instead, he did something that surprised even himself. He stopped resisting. Not surrendering, but accepting what Caitlyn's presence had awakened in him, the emotions he'd spent centuries suppressing, the humanity he'd thought was weakness, the capacity to feel that Solis Vitae bloodline had restored. The binding weapon struck him directly, its power designed to strip immortality through severing emotional connections, the final threads tying consciousness to existence. But those threads weren't weakening him anymore. They were anchoring him. Every memory of Caitlyn's scarred hands pulling stakes from his back. Every moment of her treating monsters with compassion in that clinic. Every second of her standing against an immortal conspiracy with nothing but courage. Every feeling he'd rediscovered because she'd reminded him what being human actually meant. The binding weapon recoiled. Valdric stumbled backward, shock replacing cold confidence. Impossible! No one can resist the erasure. No one has ever... "I'm not resisting it," Dragomir said, power flooding back stronger than before. "I'm transforming it. Your weapon was designed to destroy vampires who feared feeling, who saw emotion as weakness to be exploited." He stepped forward, and Valdric actually retreated. "But you can't erase someone who's finally found something worth existing for. Can't unmake someone whose humanity makes them stronger, not weaker." The weapon shattered. 7 centuries of council ultimate authority, the threat that had kept elder vampires in line for generations, broken by one vampire who'd chosen to feel instead of fear. The enforcers exchanged uncertain glances. The blood mages lowered their hands, sensing the fundamental shift in power dynamics. "This is your legacy?" Dragomir asked Valdric. "Weapons built on fear? Systems that only function when everyone's too terrified to question them? That's not strength. That's just elaborate cowardice." Valdric's composure cracked. "You think this changes anything? One vampire going rogue? The council will..." "The council is finished." Nereza's voice cut through the clearing, her holographic form expanding. 73 million viewers now, and every supernatural network is reporting the same thing: mass defections, younger vampires refusing orders, regional courts declaring independence. Your binding weapon failed on live broadcast, Valdric. You just showed the entire world that the council's ultimate threat was always a bluff. The old vampire's expression shifted through shock, rage, and finally, something Dragomir recognized because he'd felt it himself 3 days ago. Fear. "You've destroyed us," Valdric whispered. "No," Caitlyn said, stepping forward. "We've freed you, freed all of you from having to maintain a system built on lies and manufactured terror. You can choose differently now." "Choose what? Weakness? Emotional compromise?" "Choose purpose," Dragomir said. "Choose building something worth protecting instead of just preventing change. Choose remembering that immortality without meaning is just endless existence." One of the enforcers removed his helmet, the same young vampire from the Prague summit. "I choose differently," he said quietly, then louder. "I choose differently." 3 more enforcers stepped back, lowering weapons, then 5, then all 12. Valdric stood alone, his centuries of authority crumbling in real time across 73 million screens. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice carried no conviction. "You're right," Dragomir agreed. "It's just beginning." But you can either adapt to a world where fear doesn't define us, or you can fade into irrelevance while the rest of us build something better. Valdric dissolved into shadow form and vanished. The clearing fell silent except for the wind through ancient trees. Then Eliza started laughing, partially hysteria, partially relief. Did that actually work? The council's fragmented, Nereza confirmed. Not destroyed. They'll regroup, try to regain influence. But their absolute authority is broken, permanently. Dragomir turned to Caitlin, who stood watching the dawn beginning to break through the trees. Not real dawn yet. The sun wouldn't rise for another hour, but the sky was lightening. You should get inside, Eliza said. Sunlight will hurt, Dragomir acknowledged, but won't kill me, not like the myths suggest. He walked to where Caitlin stood, joining her in watching the sky transform from black to deep blue to pale gold. It's beautiful, she said softly. Yes. They stood in silence as the first rays of actual sunlight broke through the canopy. It burned where it touched Dragomir's skin, not unbearable, but painful enough that he'd avoided it for 700 years. But standing there with Caitlin, watching the world wake up, he found he didn't want to retreat into shadow. Thank you, he said, quietly. For what? For pulling those stakes 15 years ago, for seeing through my cloaking in the clinic, for believing I could choose differently. He paused. For reminding me that immortality without purpose is just an elaborate form of death. Caitlin took his hand, her scarred palm warm against his perpetually cold skin. Immortality isn't living forever, Dragomir whispered, finally understanding what 7 centuries had failed to teach him. What is it? Caitlin asked. He looked at her, this impossible human who'd shattered an empire built on fear, who'd made a monster remember what being human meant, who'd shown him that strength came from choosing compassion over control. It's finally wanting to, he said, and as dawn broke fully over the Black Forest, Dragomir Bellamort stood with Caitlin Pryor, Eliza Binney, and Nereza's holographic form, not above them as a ruler, not apart from them as a weapon, just among them, as someone finally, impossibly, alive. The end. 700 years of darkness, ended by one girl with scarred hands and a heart that refused to believe monsters were beyond redemption. Dragomir Bellamort had lived through empires rising and falling, but he'd never truly lived until Caitlin Pryor taught him that the bravest thing an immortal can do is choose to feel. And in choosing her, he'd finally chosen himself. If this epic love story hit you right in the feels, smash that like button and subscribe for more dark fantasy romance that'll restore your faith in redemption. Drop a heart in the comments if you're here for immortal vampires learning what it means to be human. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you for watching.